Hey, this is the Big Hardcore Gamer, and it's time for another review. Now, I haven't done one of these things for a while now, but after completing Alan Wake 2 on my channel, I thought it was time that I did another one. I'll be going through the things that I liked about the game, as well as the things I didn't, or just thought they could have done better. There will be no story spoilers in this review, but I will be using random gameplay footage from different areas of the game, and also talk about new gameplay mechanics that weren't in the first game. I also won't be showing any of the jump scares because if I had to deal with them, so can you. It took me 30 hours to complete, and I'll go through the reasons why it took me so long in the review. And also I played the PS5 version in quality mode at 30 frames per second. Right, let's get into it. So Alan Wake 2 is set 13 years after the events of the first game, with Alan trapped in the Dark Place after successfully freeing his wife from there at the end of the first game. The Dark Place is a nightmare world with the ability to change fiction into reality. Over the 13 years, he's made several attempts to write himself back into the real world without success. Now, in this game, there's also a second protagonist, an FBI agent named Saga Anderson, who goes to Bright Falls to investigate a murder. Both Alan's and Saga's stories are intertwined, and you get to play as both characters. Alan Wake 2 has a different tone from the first game. The first was more of an action thriller, while this time Remedy decided to go full survival horror. The first thing they did to achieve this was change the pace of the game. I'd say the best comparison I have for that would be it's similar to the Resident Evil 2 remake. It's slower paced, bigger jump scares, creepy environments, and you need to make every bullet count. I did see online that some people had issues with the slower pace and actually found the game boring because of this. This is understandable for anyone who played the first game because there was a lot more action, while in this game I didn't even fire my gun for the first time for the first few hours. But in most parts of the game, the slower pace didn't actually have a negative effect on the gameplay for me. And that's due to a new gameplay mechanic that they introduced earlier on in the game. So after an opening sequence where Remedy really lets you know that they're not messing about with this one, you're introduced to Saga Anderson and the Mine Place. The Mine Place is where Saga can take all evidence that she's collected during her investigation and connect them on an evidence board, basically changing parts of the game into a detective thriller, which justifies the slower pace. At the beginning of the game, you spend a lot of time in there because it's trying to get you used to how it works, but later on you can access the Mine Place whenever you want to, just by pressing the touchpad. You'll actually see a small notification pop up at the bottom of the screen when there's evidence that you need to examine in the Mine Place to progress the story. As well as having an evidence board, there's also a filing cabinet with, that will gradually fill up as you progress through the game with new case files. When you've reached a significant part of the investigation, you can go to the desk in the Mine Place and do some case profiling, which will update with significant information as you progress through your investigation. You can also read discovered manuscript pages in the Mine Place, or just have them narrated to you by Alan Wake, just like in the first game. And you can play back any videos or audio files that you found in the game, including music which is played at the end of each chapter. You can also access some upgrades for Saga as well, but I'll talk about that later. Now, you need to be careful when accessing the Mine Place because the world does not actually pause around you while you're in there, and you can still be attacked. So you always need to make sure that you're in a safe area first. Now, when I saw the Mine Place in previews, I was actually worried that it would be complicated to use and that it could be intimidating for most players, but they actually made it really user-friendly. If you collect evidence early, it won't let you place it on the board until previous evidence has been added. You get little clues on each piece of evidence which hints where it should be placed, and it won't let you add it to the wrong place on the board. When inserted into the correct place, you'll see an animation with strings connecting the different pieces of evidence together, and get an explanation from Saga of how it all connects. You'll also see a tag get added to parts of the investigation when it's been solved, to let you know that you don't need to add any more evidence to that part of the investigation. They actually did it really well. Now, Alan has his own version of the mind place called the Writer's Room. From there, he can change the plots of the story he's writing, which also changes the environment in real time. This was done really well. You'll be examining an area, trying to find a way to your objective or just a way out, and Alan will get a piece of useful information, and you'll say something like, this would be great for this part of the story. Then when you go to the writer's room and select the storyboard, you'll see a little tag at the bottom for you to select a different plot for the story. Once selected, you'll see like Alan on his typewriter editing the story, and you'll see the entire environment change. It was done really fast, without any loading screens, and it's one of the most impressive things I saw in the game. Now, as you've probably heard or saw from YouTube videos, Alan Wake 2 is a very good looking game. I'd go as far as to say it's one of the best looking games I've seen this year. I don't like playing games at 30 frames per second, so I usually select performance mode if I have the choice. But because of the slower pace, I decided to play it in quality mode, just like I did for Dead Space and the Callisto Protocol. I was glad I did, because this game looks amazing and ran smoothly at 30 frames per second, with a few exceptions where I noticed dips. This game is extremely detailed. A good example of this is areas in the dark place that are covered with graffiti, which is the best graffiti I've ever seen in a video game. Just like in the first game, the combat is based around light, as the monsters you face are people that have been infected by a dark presence, and you have to burn through the darkness with light before they can actually be hurt by your weapons. The effects for burning through the darkness on them has definitely been upgraded since the first game. As you beam your flashlight on the Taken, you'll see sparks flying from their body, and this can look more intense in areas with low light. Also, the muzzle flash from guns will light up a dark area and will light up enemies if fired at close range in the dark area. Facial animations are very detailed when talking to NPCs, which adds to the immersion when questioning witnesses. And there are also quite a few areas where they blend gameplay with live action footage, whether it be something going on in the background or Alan accessing a memory being played out on screen. And then there's the atmosphere in each area. They did a really good job of making every area extremely creepy to navigate through, especially when playing as Saga, who I thought had the scariest sections of the game. So now let's talk about the difference in gameplay between Alan and Saga, starting with Alan. Alan had some creepy areas to go through, like an abandoned subway station and a hotel where cult activity took place, but it didn't feel as scary as Saga's sections. I'm not gonna lie and say that the jump scares didn't get me in this parts of the game, because like I said, I live streamed it, but it was the approach to enemies that made it easier for me to play through his missions late at night than Saga's. Most enemies are visible on screen when you enter certain areas or change plot lines from the writer's room, so you always know that they're there. A lot of the time you can hear them calling your name, saying stuff like Alan Wake, and shit like that, which is a warning that you're about to be attacked by them. And after you've seen this a couple of times, you get used to it, so there's nothing really to scare you about dealing with them. The Taken in the Dark Place are shadows, which a lot of them will disappear when you focus your flashlight on them. But then there are the ones that actually reveal a person underneath, and they will attack you. Their movement is different from the Taken in the real world, as they will mostly move slow and then dash forward, covering a lot of distance, but they're not really scary. I treated them more like a puzzle, because the game will put you in some resource management scenarios when dealing with them. For example, you'll be walking through a corridor and see a bunch of Taken in front of you, blocking your objective. You only have half a flashlight battery and not enough ammo. How are you going to get through? One of the gameplay mechanics that I was talking about earlier is the angel lamp. Now, the angel lamp has the ability to harness light from a specific light source and transform surroundings in another area. You'll need this to solve environmental puzzles in the Dark Place. Just like with changing off the plot I mentioned earlier, I was really impressed by this. You hold down the X button on the controller until the icon on the screen fills up, which can be cancelled at any time. Once filled up, the environment will change, creating like new paths or ways to access different areas. It's very similar to how you switch to the ghost world in Lords of the Fallen. Sometimes you will be greeted by Taken when you transform the area though. Also, I started noticing later on when going into safe areas with lots of light that when you exit these areas, some of the Taken would respawn. Now, I only noticed this with Alan. One of the things I said I wanted when playing the first game again recently was more weapon variety. Sadly, when playing as Alan, there's actually less weapons to choose from than in the first game. You've got a revolver, a long double barrel shotgun, the flare gun and anti-flares, and flashbang grenades. When playing as Alan, I found lots of occasions when I was very low on ammo and very low on flashlight batteries. There's also one type of flashlight, while in the first game there were three: the standard, heavy duty and heavy duty lamp. While I would have liked some new weapons for Alan, I actually understand why they simplified it, because I think they wanted the player to have anxiety about managing their resources. Should you use some of your flashlight battery and the little ammo that you've got to try and kill, these Taken, or do you just run? These are questions I ask myself a lot while playing as Alan. Also, the flashbangs on flare guns aren't overpowered like they were in the first game. In the first game, a flashbang would wipe out 5 or 6 Taken at once, and so would the flare gun. This time around, the flashbang will only remove the dark shadow from Taken and stun them, and then you have to finish them off with your guns. And the flare gun, it will usually give you a one-shot kill if you get a direct hit on the Taken. And a couple of times, I think I got lucky and managed to take out 2. Now, bear in mind, I did play this on hard difficulty, so when playing on lower difficulties, these effects might be different, but this is what I experienced. When playing as Saga, you actually have more weapons available to you. She has a semi-automatic handgun, which felt a lot smoother to blast Taken with. She gets a sawn-off shotgun, which is much better for dealing with enemies when they rush you than when using Alan's long double-barrel shotgun. You can also find the hunting rifle, just like in the first game. Canisters that you can throw down by an enemy and shoot them for an explosion, and a crossbow. Now, the crossbow is very slow to reload, but you can get one-shot kills if you get a headshot. You can even retrieve the arrows from the dead Taken and use them again. I also found a lot more ammo and health packs for Saga than Alan. While this sounds great, and it was, the areas you play through a Saga were a lot more creepier. The game would have her going through the woods multiple times, which would always stress me out. Other areas designed to have me on edge were places like a dark flooded basement, and the place that stressed me out the most, an abandoned fairground. There were some parts of the game where I regretted live streaming late at night, because if I wasn't streaming, I would have got to certain areas and just said, nope, I need some daylight for this bit. Actually, there was one part in one of the streams where I literally just said, the hell with this shit, I'm out. Even though I knew there was probably some secrets and some items I could have found if I stuck around. This is because of the way they set the atmosphere with the lightning and the sound, especially the sound. When going through the woods, your ear like branches break and look around to see who's there, but you can't actually see anybody until they want you to. In one underground area, I could hear something in the room with me, but they were nowhere to be found when I was looking for them. You'll be going through an area and the music will just get more and more intense and nothing will happen. But then when everything's normal, that's when they'll hit you with a very nasty jump scare or enemies to deal with. You're always anticipating that something's going to happen, and then when it doesn't, you'll start to relax, and that's when something does happen. That was the result of at least, I would say, about 20 occasions when I thought I was going to have a heart attack while playing this game. The enemies Saga has to face are also different from Alan's, and so are the effects when killing them. For Saga, the enemies are more like the enemies in the first game, which are people possessed by the dark presence. You have to burn through the darkness with light, but then when you shoot them, you actually see flesh being blasted off their bodies. These taken usually also have a glowing red spot on their body where you can cause the most damage if you manage to shoot it. You actually see that part of the body explode if you shoot it. It usually won't kill them straight away, but it will cause a lot of damage and is very satisfying to watch. Also, I don't want to sound like a weirdo, but the sound of the flesh exploding is very satisfying. Saga also has a few new enemies to deal with, which I'll let you discover for yourself, and she also gets a few boss fights. With the boss fights, the lead up to them can be more stressful than the actual boss fight when you figure out what you need to do, but it was nice to see her getting some boss fights, in a part of the game. Actually, the first boss fight is kind of a pain in the ass, but you'll see that when you get to it. There are some things that are the same for both Alan and Saga. Earlier I compared this game to Resident Evil 2. One of the things they've definitely added that is similar to Resident Evil series is an inventory system. You can now store your weapons and items in an inventory and transfer items to storage when at a save point by using the shoebox. You can also rearrange items in the inventory to efficiently use up all of the space. Also, one of the things I complained about a lot in the first game was Alan's lack of stamina when running. It was really annoying when being chased and having to slow down because Alan was out of breath and needed his asthma pump. Luckily for us, this time it looks like Alan's been doing some cardio, during the last 13 years. Both Alan and Saga run at the same speed, and even during set pieces where you have to run and not shoot, it's manageable even at the medium speed that they're running. So I was happy with that. There are also no more annoying birds or poltergeists to deal with from the first game. A new feature that I was glad they included is an upgrade system for both Alan and Saga. When playing as Saga, you need to search for lunchboxes, which contain manuscript fragments. When you have enough fragments, you can use them to purchase upgrades in the mine place. Examples of Saga's upgrades are things like increasing the magazine size for the handgun by 50% and restoring health when killing an enemy with a sawn-off shotgun. When playing as Alan, you can upgrade by finding words of power. The words of power are signs on walls that are hidden around the dark place that you need to focus on to collect them. One word of power will allow you to buy one upgrade for things like making Alan harder to detect by enemies, increasing the Ant Flare's area of effect, and increasing the damage dealt at close proximity to enemies. Another thing I was glad they added was being able to switch between Alan and Saga from the save room. You'll get to a part of the story when you're told that you can switch between the two characters by going to a mop bucket in the save room and holding down the X button. You can cancel at any time by just letting go of the button, but when the icon on screen fills up, you'll switch to the other character's world and carry on from where you left off. You can actually decide whether you want to complete Alan's story first or Saga's, or switch in between the two like I did. I got to a part of Alan's story where it overlapped with Saga's and was switched back to Saga's world. Also, the gunplay was decent. When aiming, it was actually pretty steady. I mean, I didn't really notice a lot of weapon sway when aiming, and I was glad about this because on our difficulty, some of the enemies can be bullet sponges. They also added a melee attack, which I didn't even find out about until very late in the game. As far as the story is concerned, I really enjoyed it, even though I did get confused from time to time. Throughout my playthrough, there were many moments when I thought I had it all figured out and came up with some theories and predictions. Then I'd play a bit more and get to a live action cutscene where I didn't know what the hell was going on and then play some more and come up with new theories until I got towards the end and it all started to make sense. And this game likes to throw some weird shit at you in the cutscenes, so this happened a lot. Out of the many theories I talked about during my live stream playthrough, only one was right, and even then I didn't predict what was going to happen next. They really kept me guessing from start to finish, and I appreciated that. The actual ending left me with more questions that I hope get answered in the DLC, but if not, I think we're going to have to wait for Alan Wake 3. I just hope it doesn't take another 13 years. Also, there's a mid-credit scenes, so make sure you stick around for that. The performances from the cast were great. Ilka Vili as Alan and Melanie LeBoud as Saga Anderson did great jobs. But for me, the most memorable performance was from James McCaffrey as the voice of Alex Casey, which was my favourite. This is because James was also the voice actor for Max Payne, and Sam Lake, whose likeness was used for Alex Casey, was also used for Max Payne. So there were some sections where I said to my viewers, this really does remind me of the original Max Payne. Considering that the next games they're working on are Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, I'd say this was very smart of them to do. There are a few things that I didn't like in this game. The first thing that I complained about quite a lot was the speed it takes to use healing items. There are 3 types of healing items that range in speed and effect. There are painkillers, which are the quickest to use but have the smallest effect. Trauma kits that are slow to use and provide medium healing, and medkits that provide the most healing but are very slow to use. I didn't like having to equip an healing item and then hold down the trigger to use it. This was especially annoying when going through sections with lots of enemies and when dealing with boss fights. Navigation can be confusing at times, and me getting lost is one of the reasons why it took me 30 hours to complete this game. I know that this game wants you to figure it out for yourself, figure out where you need to go, but there were some occasions where I just couldn't progress through the game because I couldn't figure out where I needed to go. This was sometimes caused by the Angel Lamp environment puzzles, where it's not obvious where you need to go to get the light source from, and you really need to explore. And it was sometimes caused by just how bad the map is. Now, the map is very basic. You find an area map which will also display your current location, and then you just got to look at it and memorize the routes. But in order to use it, you need to enter the mind place or the writer's room and go select it. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, accessing these places takes you out of the main game but doesn't pause the game. So unless you go to a safe area, you're checking the map at your own risk. And sometimes it's not possible to go to a safe area when you're lost. Sometimes, you're in pretty dangerous areas. This may only be a problem on console, because I don't know if you can assign the map to a button on the keyboard when playing on PC, but I found the process too slow and unnecessary. I also didn't like how to upgrade Saga, it's actually much slower in comparison to upgrading Alan. You only need to find one word of power for an upgrade for Alan, and they're easier to find. Just like in the first game, where arrows on the walls will guide you to secret stashes, there are arrows to guide you to the words of power when navigating through the dark place. With Saga, you need to find like a minimum of 12 manuscript fragments for one of the upgrades. So you're going to need to go on a collector farm, if you want to upgrade it. During my playthrough, I think I only got like 2 upgrades for her. Although I did like most of the live action cutscenes and they were important to the story, I did think that some of them dragged on a bit too long. Also, although I said earlier this is one of the best looking games I've played this year, there was one little thing that I found annoying, and yes, it is a minor nitpick. There are no reflections on the mirrors. Now, this might just be missing on the console version, and it may be present on PC, but it's definitely something that I noticed. I only experienced a couple bugs that I remember during my playthrough. The first is from the first boss fight, which I won't show because of spoilers, but if you get grabbed by him, there's a way you can break free, but when breaking free, I kept spinning around in a circle for a few times, and the time I took spinning around, I could have been running from this boss to find more ammo and more health packs. Okay. The second was when pulling off a perfect dodge, I noticed that it would drop a couple of frames. So now it's time for the verdict. Alan Wake 2 was a great game. That's definitely in my top 10 games I've played this year. While I do think some areas were a little slow and some players may not have the patience to stick with it, it definitely gets better the more you play it. The story kept me guessing right up to the very end, and as I mentioned, there are still some questions that I need answered. I loved being able to switch between both characters and play through the missions in any order that I wanted, and the new gameplay mechanics added, like being able to change the plot or do the lamp switching to change the environment, and also trying to solve the case from the evidence board. I really did enjoy them. I will be replaying this game when New Game Plus is released because I want to get the platinum, and I'm also looking forward to the DLC whenever it releases. And it's also the only horror game I've played this year that actually scared me, which I didn't believe would be the case considering Dead Space was released this year. Taking into consideration the dislikes I mentioned for the game, I still like it enough to give it a high score. I'm giving Alan Wake 2 a 9 out of 10, and I definitely recommend that you check it out. If you made it to the end of this review, I'm guessing you found the video useful. If you did, please leave it a like and also share it with anyone that you know is on the fence and maybe looking for an in-depth review that's free of any spoilers. If you're new to the channel, please also consider subscribing and check out some other content. You can also find me on Twitter and TikTok at Biggy Hardcore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.